Thank you, Commissioner. As you know, the unemployment rate fell pretty dramatically. Do you see this as, would you describe it as an encouraging sign of a sustainable recovery?
This is one this is 1 month's number. Of course, you don't want to get too hung up on one particular number. But most of the change in the unemployment rate, about 2/3 of it probably, was due to falling labor force participation, which is
people simply giving up on the market, the workforce.
Well, the interesting thing is that when we looked at flows, it looked like most of the flows into non-participation were from employment rather than from unemployment. But generally speaking, it's not as robust a sign as if the fall in unemployment had come from creation of a lot of jobs.
Mm-hmm. Do you think this is that drop in the reasons for it, is that a troubling indicator or a concerning indicator?
Well, I guess it depends on the question you're asking. It's certainly not a sign of strength.
Okay. We look at, in your report, you make the case that here we are 4.5 years after the recession ended, there are still fewer payroll jobs than when the recession began, which is creating a dramatic gap in jobs in America. So at the rate of the 180,000 jobs a month that has occurred over the last 2 years, how long will it take before America is simply back to even in payroll jobs?
In total payroll jobs, it would take about 7 months into July. For private sector payrolls, it would take about 4 months to April.
Okay, so we're looking at mid-year before we get back to break even on the pre-recession payroll jobs.
That's right.
Good. The numbers, 74,000 and 87,000 private sector jobs, were disappointing, I think, for most of us who want to see much stronger recovery, far below the consensus for the report. From an economic standpoint, I'm told that numbers that small are statistically insignificant in the sense of what you read. What in your report, where are the areas, I think you mentioned retail, information, perhaps wholesale, what areas last month were statistically significant that you can tell us about?
The 55,000 jobs created in retail trade were statistically significant.
And that was in food and clothing predominantly?
That widespread in retail trade, so quite a few of the subsectors. The wholesale trade increase of 15,000 jobs was also statistically significant.
Was there any insight into that number?
Well, a lot of that was in electronic trading. So these are services provided to firms that are buying inputs, and they do it electronically, so they don't actually take possession of the inputs that they purchase on behalf of other firms, but they facilitate the purchase of these inputs by firms.
Right.
The other sector that had growth that I want to call your attention to is not a super sector, but it's very important, the temporary help services industry. That added a statistically significant 40,000 new jobs. That's often a harbinger of further growth.
Right. Thank you, Commissioner. Vice Chair Klobuchar.